Greetings children. Today we are going to learn a new lesson. This is for class 11 Cbse students. The second lesson from your textbook Hornbill. The title of the lesson is We Are Not Afraid to Die If We Can All Be Together. It is co-authored by Gordon Cook and Alan East, and Gordon Cook is the narrator of this story. Let us check the title. We are not afraid to die, which means that they are not afraid to die. They don't have any fear of death because they are all together. These are the words spoken by the children in the adventurous journey. So this story is about struggle and survival. And the presence of mind is essential to face adventures, to face adversities in our life. Let us check one quote before we moving on to the story. Look at this quote. Courage does not mean you don't get afraid. Courage means you don't let fear stop you. So when we show the presence of mind in adverse situations, that is very essential for each human for his survival. This story tells us about that survival and struggle. And in this occasion, we have to remember the famous quote given by Hemingway in his novel The Old Man and the Sea. A man can be destroyed but never defeated. That situation can be seen in this story also. Come to the story. In July 1976, my wife Mary, son Jonathan, 6, daughter Susanne, 7, and I set sail from Plymouth, England to duplicate the round the world voyage made 200 years earlier by Captain James Cook. So the first sentence of this story says us about the entire people who set out for the round the world voyage. It happened in 1976. The narrator, Gordon Cook's wife Mary, his son Jonathan, he is only 6 years old, and his daughter Susanne, 7 years old, and he himself, they started their journey from Plymouth, a port in England, to duplicate the round the world voyage. Voyage means sea journey. Round the world voyage, to duplicate, to imitate, to do it again. The round the world voyage that took place 200 years ago by Captain James Cook. James Cook took that round the world voyage thrice in his life with several purposes. But here, Gordon Cook and the family took this world round the voyage for adventure. Look at the next sentence. For the longest time, Mary and I, a 37-year-old businessman, and who was this Gordon Cook? He was a 37-year-old businessman, had dreamt of sailing in the wake of the famous explorer. They had the dream of imitating the voyage of Captain James Cook. Not only he, his wife also. They dreamt of sailing the wake of the famous explorer. Explorer means the traveler. And for the past 16 years, we had spent all our leisure time honing our seafaring skills in British waters. They not just dreamt of sailing around the world, but they had prepared for it. For the last 16 years, they had spent all their leisure time. Leisure time here means all their free time. What they spend for their leisure time for the last 16 years? Honing. Honing means sharpening their seafaring skills. Seafaring skills means seamanship, how to control a ship, and everything related with the voyaging. or sea journey that they prepared very well for the last 16 years. Not only the narrator but his wife also, because both of them had this dream to go behind Captain James Cook and imitate his world around the journey. And they practiced it in the roughest seas of the British waters. Our boat Wave Walker, a 33-meter, 30-ton wooden hulled beauty. Next, Gordon Cook gave us a clear picture of the boat by which they traveled around the world. Its name is Wave Walker, a 23-meter long boat, 30-ton weight. It is a wooden hulled. Hulled here means framed or bodied beauty. Had been professionally built, and this wave walker was built professionally, and we had spent months fitting it out and testing it in the roughest weather we could find. Not only that, it made professionally, and they tried it out in the roughest weather possible to test its efficiency. Look at the next paragraph. The first leg of our planned 3-year, 1,05,000 kilometer journey passed pleasantly as we sailed down the west coast of Africa to Cape Town. So their journey was planned for 3 years, and they had to travel 1,05,000 kilometers in total. And the first phase, the first step of that journey happened very pleasantly, very happily. They started from Plymouth in England and reached at Africa, then to the Cape Town in South Africa. Look at this picture. This is Plymouth port in England. And from here they started their journey from Plymouth. They reached Cape Town, and this much distance they traveled without any problems, without any issues. Atlantic Ocean, and they reached Cape Town. From Plymouth to Cape Town they reached. Then they have to go along this way or this way and reaching here, the Pacific Ocean, and they coming back to. This is the voyage they planned. Then to Cape Town. Therefore, heading east, we took 2 crewmen, American Laurie Vigil and Swiss Herb Siegler. Once they started their journey from Cape Town to the southern Indian Ocean, they hired 2 more crew members, Larry Vigil, he was an American, and a Switzerland man, Herb Siegler, to help us to tackle. To tackle means to manage one of the world's roughest seas, the southern Indian Ocean. So this is considered as one of the roughest seas, the southern Indian Ocean. So they hired 2 more crew members when they started their journey from Cape Town. Look at this is Cape Town port, from where they started their second phase of the journey. Look at the second page. On our second day out of Cape Town, we began to encounter strong gales. Encounter means to meet. To meet strong gales. Gales means wind. Strong wind, strong waves they had to face. For the next few weeks, they blew continuously. And the next few weeks, not days, next few weeks, they had to face such strong gales. Gales did not worry me. Gordon Cook says, the gales that did not worry him, but the size of the waves was alarming. That was very dangerous, up to 15 meters. That is unthinkable for him, because he saw the waves at a height of 15 meters, as high as our main mast. This wave is as equal to the main mast of the ship. Do you know what is a mast of a ship? that controls the ship's position. It keeps it moving along. Look at the picture. Look at this. This is the main mast of a ship. Look at the next paragraph. December 25 found us 3,500 kilometers east of Cape Town. On December 25th, they were away from Cape Town, 3,500 kilometers away. Despite atrocious weather, we had a wonderful holiday complete with a Christmas tree. Despite here means in spite of atrocious weather, very heinous, very barbaric weather, they had celebrated the day. As 25th of December is Christmas, they arranged a Christmas tree in the ship and celebrated it. Even though they had to face atrocious weather, they celebrated the Christmas. Look at the word atrocious. Atrocious cruelties. It's an adjective. Horrifyingly wicked is the meaning of atrocious. The synonyms are brutal, barbaric, barbarous, brutish, savage, vicious, wicked, cruel, nasty, ruthless, merciless, villainous, murderous, heinous, nefarious. These are all synonyms for atrocious. Atrocious means horrifyingly wicked. One more item we have to learn from here, that is despite. Without being affected by, that is the meaning of despite, or we can use in spite of. Look at this sentence. Despite state protection, he became a victim of an assassination attempt that killed him. Look at the second one. We continued to progress despite the obstacles. Despite here simply means in spite of several obstacles, we continued to progress. Look at the third one. Despite it is sunny day, the weather is cold. So when we have to present two contrastive things, contrastive ideas, we use despite. Look at the third sentence. Despite it is sunny day, the weather is cold. So that contrasting ideas, cold and sunny day, are contrasted here with the word despite. So despite is a conjunction. We use it to contrast two things. Look at the fourth sentence. The young men said they would do this despite all difficulties. Here also we used the conjunction despite. Even though there are so many difficulties, the young men said they would do it. Look at the last one. Despite his mistakes, everyone respected him. So, in spite of all the wrongs he had done, people respected him. So, here also despite is used, which simply means that in spite of all those things, like in the textbook, despite atrocious weather, they celebrated Christmas by arranging a Christmas tree in the ship. Come to the text. New Year's Day saw no improvement in the weather, but we reasoned that it had to change soon. During the Christmas day, the weather was very atrocious and days passed. Even on the New Year day, there was no change of the weather, and it did change for the worse. And just after the New Year day, it changed for the worse. Worse means more bad than the previous condition. That is what they had to face. Look at the next paragraph. At dawn on January 2nd, dawn here means break of day, which means in the morning of January 2nd. The waves were gigantic. Gigantic means very huge. We were sailing with only a small storm jib. Now they moved with only a small storm jib. Storm jib is to control the speed of the ship. They lowered its height and they are using only a small storm jib. Look at this picture. This type of jib is called the storm jib. We were still making 8 knots. The speed is very slow. They could move only 8 knots. Knots here means nautical mile, the distance in voyage or sea travel, that is knots, nautical mile. Still making 8 knots per hour. As the ship rose to the top of each wave, we could see endless, enormous seas rolling towards us. As they move forward, when they come on the top of each wave, they could see enormous waves coming towards them from the center of the seas, rolling towards them, and the screaming of the wind. They could also hear the screaming of wind, and the spray was painful to the ears, and the wave spray was so painful to the ears of the sailors. To slow the boat down, we dropped the storm jib and lashed a heavy mooring rope in a loop across the stern. Then again they slowed down its speed. To slow down it, they dropped the storm jib. They again dropped the storm jib and lashed a heavy mooring. Lashed means tied. They tied a heavy mooring rope in a loop across the stern. They used the central stern to tie it up, to keep it in tact position. Then we double lashed everything. Then they double lashed, double decreased everything. Went through our life raft drill. Then they did certain life raft drill, life saving drill they conducted. Attached lifelines. They attached their lifelines with their bodies. They donned oilskins. Donned means they dressed in oilskins, oilskin cloth to protect them from drenching, and life jackets. They put on their life jackets that filled with air to float on the water and waited. And they waited for the tragedy, the big hit. They waited for the tragedy. This was a situation that all of us couldn't face it bravely. But the people in the ship, they readied themselves with all the equipments available with them to wait for that tragedy to occur. Look at the next paragraph. The first indication of impending disaster. Impending means that is not pending, that is not stopping. That the first indication, the first sign of impending disaster, the destruction, came at about 6 p.m. on January 2nd with an ominous silence. Just before that impending disaster, they could see an ominous silence around there. Ominous silence suggesting that something unpleasant is likely to happen. So, just before the disaster, a ominous silence, an unpleasant silence occurred there. In the form of the wind dropped and the sky immediately grew dark. Then came a growing roar. Then they could hear a growing roar, a huge roaring sound that increased from gradual to a abnormal way, and an enormous cloud. Enormous means very huge. A huge cloud towered aft of the ship. Aft of the ship means the back part of the ship. The stern and the back part is called the aft of the ship. Ship had two parts, bow and aft. Aft is the back side of the ship. A huge, enormous cloud appeared at the back of the ship. With horror, I realized that it was not a cloud. But with horror, the narrator realized that it was not at all a cloud, but a wave. It was really a huge wave like no other I had ever seen. Such a huge wave he couldn't see ever in his life. It appeared perfectly vertical and almost twice the height of the other waves. It appeared vertically, almost twice the height of the other waves, and with a frightful breaking crest. And that wave had a frightful breaking crest, the curly, foamy end of the wave that had the power of breaking the ship. Look at this, a wave like this, a crust, a breaking crust that came. Look at the next paragraph. The roar increased to a thunder as the stern moved up the face of the wave. The roar increased to a thunder. The roaring sound ended with a thunderous sound as the stern moved up the face of the wave. When the stern moved up the face of the wave, and for a moment I thought we might ride over it. For a moment, the narrator thought that he could move over it, but as the stern moved up the face of the wave, it hit on its side. But then a tremendous explosion shook the deck. Then what happened was a tremendous explosion the captain could hear, and that shook the deck of the ship, the aboard of the ship that shook. A torrent of green and white water broke over the ship. The after result of this hit was this huge wave hit was a torrent of green and white water that broke over the ship. My head smashed into the wheel. Then Captain Gordon Cook, he was controlling the ship. His head smashed against the wheel. Wheel is the steering of the ship. His head hit on it because of the heavy wave that hit the board of the ship. I was aware of flying overboard. Then what happened was the next moment he was aware of he was flying overboard. He was taken away from the boat into the sea. He was flying overboard. He was flying overboard into the sea and sinking below the waves. Then he started sinking, going down the waves there. He accepted his approaching death. I accepted my approaching death, and he accepted his death. And as I was losing consciousness, with the effect of the hit and flying over to the seas, he lost his consciousness, and I felt quite peaceful. It is not the peace of mind, but the peace of physical unconsciousness. He felt that peace in his mind because he lost his consciousness. He was completely black out because of the hit and overthrown with the effect of the wave. He was not there in the ship. The ship was left without a captain, now in the middle of the seas, the most dangerous seas, the southern Indian Ocean. The ship was there with his children, wife, and a few crew members, but the captain was now in the seas. Look at the next paragraph. Unexpectedly, my head popped out of the water. A few meters away, Waywalker was near capsizing, her mast almost horizontal. One unexpected thing happened then. He came back to his consciousness. His head popped out of water, came out of water, and he saw the Waywalker, the ship. It was near capsizing. Capsizing means sinking, going down to water. Her mast almost horizontal. Its mast were almost horizontal in shape. It was vertical, but now it was horizontal in shape. Look at that. Somewhat horizontal now. He saw the ship. Then a wave hurled her upright. Then another wave came and hurled her upright, put her upright. My lifeline jerked. It was at this time his lifeline that attached with the life raft that jerked, that taut, that tightened him. Then I grabbed the guardrails. Immediately he caught hold of the guardrails of the ship and sailed through the air into Wavewalker's main boom. Boom is the front portion of the ship. Then somehow he managed to came back to the ship at the boom of the ship. Then subsequent waves tossed me around the deck like a rag doll. Now once again the Captain Gordon Cook, came back to the boom or deck of the ship. Then the consequent waves tossed him like a rag doll. Look at the rag doll. Something like a doll without life, without any consciousness, without any control. He was tossed. He became a doll in the hands of the fate. He was tossed in the deck of the ship. Look at that. My left ribs cracked, my mouth filled with blood and broken teeth. These were happened with the captain. His ribs cracked, broken, and his mouth was filled with blood and teeth broken. Somehow he found the wheel, lined up the stern for the next wave and hung on. Somehow he managed to reach at the wheels and lined up the stern and ready for the next wave, and he hung on the wheels. Water everywhere. I could feel that the ship had water below, but I dared not abandon the wheel to investigate suddenly. So water everywhere reminds us of water everywhere, but not a drop to drink. Like that, he is in the middle of water, but he couldn't do anything at all. I could feel that ship had water below, but I dared not abandon the wheel to investigate. As a captain, he could feel that somehow below the ship water entered, but he couldn't leave the wheel now, the steering now, to go and investigate what happened with it. Suddenly, look at the next page. The front hatch was thrown open. Hatch is the door of a ship or door of a aircraft is called hatch. The hatch of the ship was thrown open and Mary appeared. Mary is his wife appeared. We are singing, she screamed. She was crying, she was screaming, she was yelling out that they were singing. The decks are smashed. The decks of the ship was smashed, was broken, and we are full of water, she said. Take the wheel, I shouted as I scrambled for the hatch. Immediately, Captain Gordon Cook ordered her to control the ship. He wanted to investigate it. Then he scrambled for the hatch. Scrambled means walked unsteadily towards the door to go inside and investigate the condition of the ship. Here we can stop the first part of the explanation. You will get the second and third or fourth part in the coming videos. For that, you have to subscribe the channel and press the bell icon. Don't forget to share this video with your friends. Thank you for watching till the end.